Hey everyone, this is Phil here, the technical PM over at ChainSafe for the Lodestar project. So I'm here today to do a video demoing setting up Lodestar on your Ubuntu server. I'm here utilizing my MacBook to go through some of these steps and go through the guide step by step with you and basically get you all set up. We highly recommend using Docker, which is the setup we're going to go through today, as its containers will help isolate and keep things secure. And it is the recommended way we would ask people to utilize Lodestar for the time being. So over here, if you go to hackmd.io/@philknows, you'll be able to find the Lodestar setup guide v2. So we're going to do this by setting up a geth docker alongside our Lodestar Ethereum Consensus client. So you'll need Docker Engine, Docker Compose, and we're going to go through the entire setup, including the deposit, which will require you to have a Metamask crypto wallet set up. Here I have it here on my browser extension. If you do not know how to, just go to metamask.io to get that installed and set up for yourselves. I will be demoing setting this up on the Prater testnet using Goerli ETH, which is testnet Ether. Feel free to come onto the Lodestar general channel and ask for some of this Goerli Ether to try this out. So any technical support issues or anything like that, you can find us on our ChainSafe Discord server under the Lodestar general channel. So staking a validator requires 32 Ethereum plus gas fees, of course. Everything that I sort of demo here, of course, is only for informational purposes, does not constitute professional advice. Please read the disclaimer before continuing. And we'll get started here. So I'll be demoing getting us set up on the testnet. The prerequisites are here. Here are some of the hardware requirements for you to get set up. This is the minimum and recommended hardware to go with. And we'll start off with part one. We'll go right to generating the staking data that you'll need to generate your keys. Oops. That was weird. Okay, here we go. Part one, generating the staking data. So as I mentioned, you can get some Goerli ETH from us at the ChainSafe Discord channel. We're going to use the official ETH 2.0 deposit command line interface. So in the guide here, there's a link. It'll take you right to the releases here, and we'll just download this onto the Mac here. So, oh, look at that. 6 days ago, there was a new release. Perfect. Okay, well, maybe some of this stuff has changed. Let's see here. Okay, so we're going to need the Darwin version. Yes, this is the one I'm going to use. If you have Linux or Windows, please download the one that's of the platform you're going to be running this on. Just as a side note, it is important here for you to run this program ideally on a what's called like an air gap device. So an air gap device is basically a computer that is not connected to the internet. Because you will be generating these keys, you want to make sure you're using a clean computer, especially if you're doing this on mainnet, and then you would run this program on that clean computer. So I'm going to demo it here on the Mac, which is online, but you know, for mainnet staking, it is highly recommended that you do this part of the process through an air-gapped computer. So if it means copying the files to a USB stick and transferring over, please do that. Okay, so we're going to download the staking deposit CLI here. Okay, and then we're going to run it. So everything that I've basically explained here is on the setup guide. There are instructions here for how you run this on Linux. And then for macOS is the one that we're going to follow here for this specific demo. So the easiest way to sort of navigate to the folder on your terminal, of course, is to enable it through your Finder. So if you have your Finder, basically, you will be able to unzip this. So just make sure you do that. Okay, perfect. Now we have the folder out here. Now this folder, if you do not have the option when you right-click it to open the terminal at the folder, it'll make it easier for you. You can always go to Finder, Services, and Service Preferences. And then under Shortcuts, you can enable the new terminal at folder. So it's already checked here for me. This will allow you to open up a terminal so we can use the command line interface to basically generate these keys. So I will do that here. I'll open a new terminal at this folder. Okay, and that will basically allow us to run that command CLI. And all the instructions is basically here. We're going to use the deposit script here. So we're going to create a new mnemonic, which is a 24-word seed phrase, and I'll explain as we go through the process. But we will have to specify the number of validators we would like to stake, and then we would have to identify which chain we would like to generate the keys for. So for example, down here, we have a new mnemonic being created, and we are generating one validator, and under the chain mainnet, which I will change because I'm going to demo it using the Prater testnet. So I'll just copy this as an example. Into the terminal we go, paste it. I will change mainnet to Prater and hit enter. Now, if you get this, it basically means that because this program is not signed by Apple, it detects it as malicious software. So if it doesn't run like this, what we'll have to do is we'll have to basically force it to run by going through our settings. So under System Preferences, we have Security and Privacy. Under General, deposit was blocked from use because it's not from an identified developer. That's fine. We will allow it anyway. Okay, so that should fix that problem. We will go back, and then using the up key, I can basically rerun this command here. Open. Okay, now it's going to ask us to choose our language. So I'm going to make this bigger for you just so you can see a little better. There we go. Okay, so default is English, but if you'd like, you can type in English for good measure. Please choose your mnemonic language. We will do English. Create a password that secures your validated key stores. So this is a password you'll need to remember for later in the process. We will just put in whatever password you think will work for you. Keep your key store password, perfect. Okay, so what this does is it generates the 24 words that you will use to generate the keys that you are using for staking. So I highly suggest that when dealing with these words, it's never in a digital format for that is accessible to you, because anybody with these 24 words will have access to regenerating the keys to your validators, which is not good if it's not you. So I usually will just write it on a piece of paper and basically figure out another way to store it that is not digital. So these 24 words, for this demo purpose, because I'm not using this with real Ether, I will basically copy this onto like a text file here. Don't do what I'm doing, especially if it's mainnet keys. It's not something you want to do, leaving your 24 words in some digital format on your computer. Okay, so when you have written it down, we will basically press any key. Okay, now it's going to ask us for the mnemonic, separated by the spaces. So I'll just retype it here. So yeah. Pretty sure I could have just copied and pasted it here, but I'll type it anyway for good measure. Okay. That was good. Looks like I messed something up. Okay, let's just try copying and pasting it this time. Okay, it's good. So if you did it properly, you'll get the little rhino, which will generate the keys, create the key stores, and verify it, and basically tell you where it's located at. Okay, so my keys can be found under users, Filipino desktop, Lodestar setup demo, and then basically the folder. So we'll press any key, and that's it. You've generated your keys. Now this folder here, ideally if you were on a air-gapped computer doing this, you would basically copy those files over onto like a USB into the server that we are going to use later on. So we'll exit this. As you can see in the folder, we have now generated validator keys, and inside here we have a deposit data.json file, and we have a key store file. Okay, so you'll need both of these, so just remember where they are. That basically concludes the first part of the setup here, which generates the keys you will be using for staking. There's a lot of warnings and stuff here. Basically everything that I have told you is in here. These screenshots were generated using Linux, but you should have no problem doing this on either Windows, Linux, or Mac. So all the explanations are here with the deposit data and the key store. And the ETH Staker community is working on the Stakehouse Wagyu key generator, which is a more graphical user interface for doing exactly what we just did. It is not fully audited yet, and it currently supports Prayer Testnet. This will probably change in the near future if you would like to try this out. Okay, so we're not going to deposit any ETH at this moment. We just generate the keys that we will be using. Now, we're going to go and continue to set up and secure the actual server that we will be using to put Lodestar on. Okay, and we're back with part 2 of actually setting up and securing your server. Okay, so as part 2 of the guide, it kind of goes step by step here. When you install Ubuntu server, likely you created a new user for yourself. However, if you have not, I would suggest following these steps here to create a new user. As long as you're not using user root, everything's good. So right now on my Ubuntu server, I have a user named Lodestar at my server called ETH Staker. So creating a new user is not necessary because I'm not the root of this server at the moment. So importantly, next step is to actually update the server. So we'll go and do that. You can basically copy and paste the commands here if you'd like. And this will make sure that your server has all the latest updates. So we'll let it do its thing here. And once this is complete, we will just do the second command here. So we'll wait for that to finish. You may not get the exact same sort of lines here. It really depends on your hardware, the sort of the Linux kernel that you're using. So some of this stuff you may not see, very specific to my own server. Okay, next command. Okay, it's good. And then we will do the reboot command. So we'll let the server reboot, and then we'll come back and get started. Okay, that should be enough time now. Just FYI, I'm using a program called Prometheus to basically log into or secure shell SSH into my Ubuntu server. There are many different programs out there, depending on what you like using. As long as you have the ability to log in SSH, that's all that matters. You could even just use terminal if you'd like. So logging back in to the server, make sure you know your server's IP, and the default port for SSH is 22. And that is generally what you will start off with as a nice, clean, new Ubuntu server. With all the updates applied, you can tell that there are no updates, additional updates available. Okay. Now we're actually going to secure this. The best way to actually do this is, of course, to use SSH keys only to log in and not use passwords. So what we are going to do, there are actually multiple methods in this setup guide. There are other ways to secure your server, whether that is actually using a password and setting up two-factor authentication with Google Authenticator if you'd like. Really depends on your preference here, but for this demonstration, I will actually be using setting up SSH keys only. It is probably the more advanced method, but it's much more recommended for security. So we're actually going to, first of all, create a new SSH key pair utilizing RSA. So we will do these commands here. So we're just going to go right back to where are we in the directory here for Lodestar. You can always use a command called pwd, which stands for present working directory, and it'll tell you exactly where you are in the terminal at the moment. Okay, so we'll use SSH keygen here to generate the key pair. Okay, enter the file in which you would like to save. You can just use the default, which is id_RSA. That is totally fine too. Okay, so create a directory under home/lodestar/.ssh. Okay, so that is where it has been generated. Now we will go into back to the guide. So we'll transfer the keys to the remote server, which is located in this directory here, if you actually generated it from another device. But we generated it right on the server itself, so that is fine. We will actually copy this here. So there are some things that you will need to change here. Okay, so I'm going to copy this command here. There are a couple parameters that we actually have to change, which are in the notes here. Oops, empty for no passphrase, okay. Empty for no passphrase. If it doesn't match, then you'll try again. So I'll push enter for no passphrase, enter again. Okay, here's the key fingerprint. that's been generated. Okay. So now we'll actually copy this, which I think I already did. We'll do it again. Go back into Terminus. Let's paste this. Oops, I ran the command already without me changing it. So user for my server is Lodestar at Eth Staker. Okay, can it be established? Are you sure you want to connect? Yes. Okay, one key remains to be installed. If you're, yep. So there's no password associated, or the password to actually log in. Okay, so when that is entered, it'll say that the number of keys added is 1. So now you can actually try using this instance to secure shell into the server again with the new key. So just do what it says, SSH Lodestar at Eth Staker. Great, we got another instance. So it worked. So now we'll log out of this one. Okay, and we'll go back to our setup guide. All of that was basically established here. So once we confirm that works, what I like to do for good measure is actually log out again and make sure that it actually works. But the most important thing, of course, is to get that private key so you're able to log in with the SSH key. So we've already identified that it is in the .ssh folder. So you will be able to see it with the ls command, the ls, and then using the flag LAH, you'll be able to see all of the hidden stuff as well. So we need to go into the SSH folder. So this part is not part of the guide, but this is just for good knowledge for people who may not be familiar with utilizing Linux. So we'll go into the .ssh folder using the cd command. We'll type ls again, and then you'll see the different files here, which are basically the keys that were generated. Now we have to actually copy these into a USB stick of some sort so that we can access it remotely from elsewhere as well. So I'm going to go to my server and actually copy these. Okay, so I just inserted the USB stick into my server, which will now be accessible, so we can actually copy the files that we need. So we need the ID RSA private key to be able to log in with the SSH. So although this method is recommended, it is a bit more advanced, so some of this stuff that you're seeing here is not in the guide, but you can follow along here and utilize the same commands that I am. So my USB stick is inserted. The way to ensure that it is and is detecting it is to use a command using sudo fdisk and then -L. So that, and then type in your password. That will list out everything that's sort of connected in terms of your disks. So I know that the USB stick that I inserted was a SanDisk. This one here, it is a large one. It's like 230 something gigabytes. So what's important here is actually the volumes here. Okay, so the device name is under /dev/SDA2. This is the one that we're going to need. It's formatted as a FAT disk, FAT, which is the file system. So this is the one we want to mount to our server so that I can actually copy stuff over. So the way to do this is usually I'll make a directory of which I can access the USB stick from. So I usually do it by utilizing a command called sudo mkdir which basically means make directory. And then you will, I will actually do it under media and then just create a folder called USB-stick. Okay. So now that we have that folder there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a command to mount the /dev/sda2 of my device onto this folder here, media/USB stick. Okay. So the command to do that is sudo mount and then the device. So that's /dev/sda2, and then we will mount it to /media/USB stick. So it won't return any sort of response. The way to sort of check it is to go into the folder itself. So we'll use change directory cd /media/USB stick. Although I don't think there's anything in here anyway, so you probably won't see anything show up. Yeah, there's nothing in here. Just some hidden files and stuff. Okay, so what we need to do now is actually copy those files that I mentioned earlier. So the way to do that is to obviously let's go back to the directory of the secure shell with the private keys. So the best way to do that is to use change directory and then use the squiggly sign on the top left corner of your keyboard. That will take us back to our home/user directory. Okay, so if I just did this, you can see that it just goes right back to Lodestar at Eth Staker. So if you use pwd, you'll see exactly where you are. You're inside the home/Lodestar folder. Perfect. Okay, so now we will go into our .sh folder. Now that we're inside, we can just take a look and make sure the files are there. Okay, so the one that we need is the ID_RSA. That contains the private key that we will use to log into our server. So to copy this onto the USB stick, we will just use the command sudo cp, which is copy, and then we'll do ID_RSA space. And now we have to direct where we're copying it to. So that is /media/USB stick. And then we'll hit enter. So now that it's copied, we can double check by using the change directory key and going into the USB stick. So cd /media/USB stick. Okay, and then we'll use the ls command. Perfect, it's inside there. Now I'm going to actually need this key on my Mac so that I can actually attach to Termius and log in again, this time with SSH keys and without the password. Oh yes, and of course we have to unmount it, and the command to do that is sudo umount, and if you remember the volume of where your USB key is, mine was /dev/sda2. Oh, it says it's busy. If you get this, it basically means it's busy doing something, which I'm still in that directory, so we'll just get out of that directory here, and then we'll do it again. Now it should work. Now we can pull out the USB stick. Okay, so I've taken the USB stick out of my server and into my Mac. This is very specific, of course, to Termius. Whatever program you're using to access your Linux server, just make sure you figure out how to actually attach the private key to log in to your server. But for me, it would actually be in Termius here under password. It's going to ask on the right-hand side for keys if you would like to import one. So I'm going to add a key here, and I'll call this Lodestar demo key. Okay, there was no passphrase when we generated it, so we'll leave that blank. Now for the actual private key itself, it's going to ask for a file. So under the USB stick, I have the ID RSA file, so I'll open that. And it has the private key in there, so I will save it. Okay, so now it's actually going to log in with the key and should not prompt me for my password. So we'll give that a login. Perfect. Great. So everything works as intended, never asked me for a password. Now we can move on with the next step in the guide. So all of that stuff in terms of actually working with Linux is not in the guide. It's very simple if you just follow the steps in the video here. Now we're going to actually continue with this part. So once we confirm that works, we can log out and then ensure that the necessary private key is in the other devices you wish to log in from. So we will now disable the root login and we will make some configuration changes to the file here, to the SSHD config file, so that we can disable password authentication. So you will need the private key to actually log into your server. Okay, so we'll start with this command here. Okay, you'll still need to know the password to use sudo, of course. Okay, so inside this file here, we are going to locate challenge response authentication and update it to no. Okay, so we're going to look for that. Okay, oh, a couple other things as well. So password authentication will also be no. Permit root login will be prohibit password. Permit empty passwords, no. Okay. So permit root login will delete the comment on there to ensure that is actually in there. So we got permit root login. Look for password authentication and scroll down further, password authentication. I'm going to change this to no. Permit empty passwords is no, but it is commented out, so we will remove that. Okay, and then we're missing challenge response authentication, no. So that is already set. Perfect. Okay, so we will actually save this and exit. So we'll use Control X, hit Y to save, yes, enter. Okay, so it's saved now. We'll validate the syntax of the new SSH configuration. So we'll utilize this command here. Okay, no errors returned. So now we will restart the SSH process using this command here. Now we will verify that the login still works. So we can do this by even just logging out and coming back in. Okay, login is still good. All right. This is the optional stuff. If you wish to just make it easier for yourself to log in, we don't have to do this. But everything works pretty good so far. So let's try actually to log in with, try to log in with the password and see what happens. It should actually fail. Okay, so username Lodestar, and we'll leave it without a password. Let's give this a shot. Okay, good. Will not let us in. Okay, so we'll delete that. Move, and we'll log back in with our key. All right. So now moving on, we'll modify the default SSH port. It's always good to move it off of port 22, which is the default. Even though we are, protected with the key, it's also a good idea to change the port anyway. So utilizing this command here, we can actually see if the port number we wish to use is actually being used. So where it says your SSH port number, just think of a port number between, I think it was 1024 and 49,151. Let's just do, for funsies, 42069. So do the password. If it doesn't return anything, that's good. Okay, so blank response indicates not in use. If it's a red text, then it will. So if I did something like 22, it'll show something like this. Okay, so if it's available, we will actually go and modify that same file by copying this command here. And now in that same file, we're actually going to uncomment the port and we'll change it to 42069. Okay, now we will actually save this and exit. So Control X, save by hitting yes, and then enter. Perfect. Okay, so it's all explained here. Now we will use the systemctl restart command. So we'll restart the SSH. And now we will actually exit, log back out, and log back in using the new port number. So let's actually try with 22. This should not work. Okay, perfect. So 22 is no longer the port being used. We'll do port for 2069. Okay. Now it works. Perfect. We are logged back in. Okay. So I'm going to skip the two-factor authentication. If you would like to do this, the instructions are on the setup guide for you to go through. It's very simple. Does not require all of the advanced stuff that showed you earlier. Should be pretty straightforward. Okay, next we're going to install fail2ban. So fail2ban is an intrusion protection system that monitors log files. So basically, it'll ban IP addresses from doing too many failed attempts onto your server. So we will actually copy this, make it easy for ourselves, copy and paste, enter your password, and get that installed. Okay, now it's installed. Now we will edit the configuration file that monitors the SSH logins. So copy that command. Okay, great. It's a blank page here. So now we will add exactly these parameters here. So there are some things that we will have to change on here. So port, we changed our port to 42069. So we'll need to change that. Max retries 3. If you would like to whitelist IP addresses, you could, put your daily laptop and PC that you use to log in here. Otherwise, you can just leave it blank. It's not a big deal. If you if you're going through the retries and you get yourself banned, that should not happen, especially with the private key set now. So we can just leave it blank. Unless, of course, you have any other reasons, whether like you're probably in a cloud, utilizing a cloud server or something, and you need to, put some whitelist IPs, you can do so here. Okay, so we will save this, yes, and enter. Okay, and then we will restart fail2ban for settings to take effect. Perfect. So now we will clear the screen here. Now we will deal with the firewall. Okay. So install universal firewall. Okay, it's already been installed. If not, that command will install it. So now we will apply some defaults to it, which are these two commands here. Default deny incoming and default allow outgoing. Okay. Next, we'll have to manually allow some of the ports that we are going to utilize. So this one here is specifically for your SSH port number to make sure we don't block that. So ours is 420.69/TCP. Okay, once it's added, it'll tell us that the rules have been updated. Perfect. Next, we will deny port 22 because we don't want people utilizing that. So deny that. Next, we will allow Go or geth to basically work on the port here. The default port is 30303. I am running a couple other things on my local network here, so for my purposes specifically, don't do this unless you know what you're doing, but I will actually have a listing port at 30304 instead. Next, the Lodestar ports. So we will allow the default port 9000 to actually work, but I am running a couple other Lodestar nodes here. So, unless you know what you're doing with your networking, leave it at 9000. For my specific purpose, I will be utilizing port 9001. So I will be putting 9001 here. And Prometheus metrics. So in order for you to be able to access the metrics, you will have to open up port 3000. We will allow that. Okay. And then deny any other internal IP addresses as required. So this is something that will be determined based on your own situations if you need to block other specific ports or IP addresses. Okay, next is we will enable the firewall. So sudo ufw enable, I think that's the command. Yes, that's right. Okay, may disrupt existing connections. Yes, but because we allowed our SSH port 42069, should not be an issue with the SSH connection as the firewall gets enabled. This may take a little bit. Okay, so it's active. Now the way to see what's going on is to utilize sudo ufw status numbered, which is also the command over here on the setup guide. So this will tell you what the status of your firewall is. We got our SSH port. We got the blocking the default SSH port. This is the geth port. It's usually 30303. I modified it to 304 for my own purposes. Lodestar's port 9000 by default. For my purpose, I'm using 9001. 3000 is for Prometheus metrics, and yes, that should be it. Everything looks good. So that is utilizing universal firewall to basically set up a firewall, make sure you're blocking off all the other ports. Next step is to configure timekeeping on the server. So we'll utilize this command. Okay, so what we want to ensure is the NTP service is active. Okay, so if not, then you will run this command. Okay, and that is pretty much all you need to set up and secure your server. we will move on to the next step with getting Docker set up and getting the actual Lodestar node running. Okay, so this is part 3A. This is the preferred method of setting up Lodestar. At the moment, it is the only one on the setup guide right now. We highly suggest utilizing Docker to run a Lodestar instance. So with that, let's just go down to follow the instructions, starting with install Docker engine. So basically just copy and paste these commands. Let's clear that. And now we will install all of those. Looks like they were all installed, so that's great. Next, we'll copy this command. This will download the keyring to make sure you're getting the right stuff. Okay, and then we'll get the next command here. Copy, paste this. Great. Next, we will run the next command. This will get the updates, and you can see now we're getting updates from Docker here as well, which basically means we can install Docker, which is the next command here. So it's going to ask, yeah, 409 megabytes of additional space. Yes, enter, or the letter Y. Okay, as you can see here, it's all in there. The next command is actually just a test Docker to ensure that it's actually working, and that is this command here, sudo docker run hello world. So once it is done installing, we will run the next command. Great, looks good. Let's clear the screen. Next command, sudo docker hello world. So it can't find the Docker image, so it's pulling it from Docker Hub and basically says blah blah blah, everything's working. That's great. Okay, so let's get that off our screen and move on to installing Docker Compose. Okay, we can confirm the latest release here. Okay, so the previous page that I had shown was actually the incorrect one. Over here on the Docker docs, .com/compose/install, you will see the instructions on how to install Docker Compose. We will run this command to get the current stable release of Docker Compose, which is 1.29.2, which is basically what we have here. Okay. So we'll just copy this command here, paste it, perfect. And now the way to ensure, just follow the instructions on the setup guide. So now we will change permissions to allow Docker Compose to be executable, perfect. And now we will verify that was successful by utilizing this command here, which should show the version, perfect. Okay. So now we will download and configure the Lodestar environment. Okay. Let's do this. Going through this here, we're just going to do a light clone of our repository here. So just copy and paste the command. Let's clear this first. Okay. So what this did was basically it changed our directory to our main Lodestar user directory. That's this here. And then I told it to basically do a light clone of the ChainSafe/Lodestar repository. So now if you use the command ls, you'll see the Lodestar folder is in there. Okay. So now we have to set up the Lodestar environment file. Okay, the way to do that is to utilize this command. So it also brings us to the Lodestar directory and then tells us to copy the default environment file and then create a new environment file. So just copy and paste this command here. And then we will modify the parameters of the environment file by utilizing nano.env, like so. Okay, so now that we're in here, we need to specify the network we want to work on. So if you're setting up for mainnet, leave it as mainnet. If you're setting up for another testnet, like Prater, type in Prater, and then we will use Control X to save it, hit Y to say yes, and then enter to overwrite the .env file. Okay, now that that's done, so yeah, it's all explained over here. Same thing for testnet users. Okay, create a new Docker Compose environment. So now we just open up the Nano editor. So now it's a blank editor. Now we're going to copy and paste this YAML file. So all of these lines here is basically telling Docker Compose to run these different services for us, and it's all configured right now to specifically for this guide. So we'll just copy all 50 lines of this. We'll paste it. Okay. And I'll just briefly explain what these services are. So this will open up a geth Docker container for you. It's utilizing the stable version of geth. Now under here, command, which is line 8, these are the parameters that you will be running with geth. So if you want to add any additional command line arguments to this, you would add it to the command line here. So for example, I'm not using the default port for the geth Docker. So I will actually be adding a command which will change this. So under here you can see there's also a link to the Go Ethereum CLI commands, which you can also add if you know what you're doing. So we're going to, for me specifically, I'm actually going to look for port, because I changed the port value of my networking. So that would be this here. So you can see in my specific setup, I will add port 30304. If you're using the default 30303 port, you don't even need to add that in there. Okay, next is the ChainSafe beacon node image. So we will be utilizing the latest tag, which is basically the latest stable version. And we will keep to that because we want to use the latest and not the nightly versions, which are generally unstable. Now, same with this command line here, which you can see inside of the setup guide. There is also a link to the Lodestar CLI commands, which you can use to modify some of the parameters that you will use on the beacon node. So line 19 here. Okay, so Lodestar has a bunch of different command line references inside of our documentation here. And then for the beacon specifically, because I'm running on a different port, I will need to very specifically tell them which port. So I will need this network disk v5 bind address, in addition to my command line here, which may not be the case for you, but this is just a demonstration of how you can add different sort of arguments to your Lodestar setup. So the default here is UDP port 9000, and I will change that to 9001, and then I believe the network.local multi-addresses, local listing addresses for request, response, and gossip. I will need to change this too for my specific setup because I'm utilizing port 9001, not 9000. Okay. So this is my setup here for the beacon node. Next up, oh yes, very important. Because we are a testnet user, I'm doing this on Goerli. It is very, very important for you to set the Goerli flag on the geth Docker. If you're utilizing mainnet, you don't need to add that in there. All right. Next is quick syncing your beacon node. So the cool thing about the Ethereum beacon chain is we have something called weak subjectivity syncs, which basically allows you to utilize a weak subjectivity checkpoint and then be able to basically sync faster to the network. So as an example here, I can show you how to create a free account on Infura and then take a ETH2 project. But basically, you'll end up with a link that you will need to add to the command line if you are going to use weak subjectivity sync, which is also basically a quick sync. If you would like to do that, I can do that for you as a demonstration. If not, you can skip this part of it. Okay, so I've already signed up and I have a dashboard or project set up already. So to give you an example, let's see. I would need a weak subjectivity checkpoint, so I will go under project settings. Nope, this is the ETH1. We will need to go to the Infura ETH2 endpoint for Prater. So why don't we actually just create a new one here as an example. So we'll do ETH2, we'll do Lodestar Prater. Great. Okay. So the endpoint we want is Prater, and then we will copy this endpoint, which is what we will use for the weak subjectivity sync. Okay, so take note of that endpoint for mainnet if you are utilizing mainnet. And then at the end of line 19, which is basically the command that we have here, we will also add an additional command for the weak subjectivity sync. So if you look at the Lodestar command lines, under beacon, we have a flag called weak subjectivity sync latest. This is the one that we're going to need to enable fetching of a weak subjectivity state. Okay. So that's the flag that we need to add in there. And then the next one is the actual server URL, which we will need to fetch that checkpoint. So add that, and then the endpoint here for Prater. Remember, if you're doing it for mainnet, use mainnet. If you're doing it for testnet, use Prater. Okay, so copy that. And that will allow you to actually quick sync, and you should have a beacon node that would be synced within a few minutes, ideally. Okay, so when you're done modifying that file, we will basically save it by pushing Control X, hitting Y for yes, and then the file that we would like to name it is docker-compose.yml, which is stated in this instruction here. Now we're going to hit enter. It says it exists, overwrite, yes. Okay. So now that that's done, we can actually start some of these services. So to start the geth docker service first, we will utilize this command here, which will utilize docker compose to spin up a container for the geth docker service. Okay, perfect. Creating geth docker, done. Okay, so you can utilize the docker logs command to basically see what's going on with that container. So what we can do here is utilize sudo docker logs. The eth flag will allow us to keep following as it keeps outputting new stuff into the logs. So we'll do that, and then for geth docker, so you can see it's starting to import the new block headers, so it is starting to sync. Now you can also scroll up just to make sure everything looks okay. So starting geth on Goerli testnet, perfect. That's exactly what we set it up as. The other important thing as well is just looking at the making sure it pulled the right version. So, and also for me, it would be the ports. So the port is set properly. And geth version 1.10.15 stable, which is the latest there, and everything looks good. So now it's just starting to actually populate. You can follow along. It should tell you how it's progressing, basically. Looks like it's looking for more peers. Here we go again. Perfect. And it should basically show at some point how far along it is synced. So right now it's at 0.67%. Okay, so not bad. It might take a little while, but it shouldn't be as long as we think. So while that's actually running, it's important to know that if you're not getting any peers, that you figure out your port forwarding. If your port, whatever is set for geth, mine is 30304, but if the default port for geth 30303 is not actually set properly to forward to your Ethereum server, your staking server, then it's likely you might have trouble finding peers. Okay, so now we'll move on. Right now it's still actually just outputting logs from this container. As you can see, if you scroll to the very bottom, so the way to exit that is to use Control-C, and that will basically stop the outputting of the logs. So let's clear this here. Okay, perfect. So with that going, it might be better to just wait a little bit until it's synced up a little more, or else you're going to get some errors while you start up the Lodestar beacon node, because you don't have a fully synced geth node that it's connecting to yet, so it'll just probably show you some errors. That's why it says here, wait until synced and then proceed to the next step. But now you actually have a geth server that's running locally at port 8545 that your Lodestar beacon node will be talking to. Okay, so we'll just wait till it syncs a little bit longer, and then we'll actually start the Lodestar beacon node. Okay, now let's see if it looks a little bit more synced up. So the way to sort of see what's going on is to, of course, use the sudo docker logs, and then the eth flag, and then alongside geth docker. That way we'll get the logs of what's happening. If you also want to, so that you don't get all of the logs, since the very beginning of starting the container, you might just want to use a flag that's the -n, and then just put in like a number of lines you wish to actually go back to. So we'll get like the latest 100 lines alongside geth docker, so we don't get all of the thousands of lines that's probably outputted by now. So we'll input the password. Okay, so let's see here. It looks like it's synced up much more now, probably only about, I don't know, 6 months behind. Good enough to start. Okay. Let's clear this up. Okay, so we'll go back to the setup guide. We have the start Lodestar beacon node service. Okay. So now we're going to run this command to get the Lodestar beacon node service started. Of course, make sure that you're inside of the Lodestar directory. By using pwd, you can see where you are. And inside home/Lodestar/Lodestar. Perfect. And if you're ever unsure, you can use the ls command. And if you see all of our repository files, then you're in the right place. Okay, so we'll clear that. Let's use the command and start up the beacon node. So now it's pulling everything. And once you see creating Lodestar beacon node done, that's great. That means it's up. So the way to double check that is to use sudo docker ps, which shows all the containers that are running. Looks good. It's been up 11 seconds. It's not consistently restarting, which is a good sign. So going back to the guide here, we just did the sudo docker ps command. Now we can actually see the logs from the container by utilizing this command. And of course, if you want to follow along with the output of the lines, we just use the F flag. Okay. Yes, so we are actually on version 0.34, which is the latest one. It's just, unfortunately, we're fixing this up. Let's see. So network Prater, which is good. Okay, we are initializing from a beacon state, anchor state. Perfect. So it did fetch the weak subjectivity state, which is great. And then the backfill sync is starting from the checkpoint. It's perfect. Now you'll see some errors on some things like the finality header. This has to do with our light client, so don't worry about these errors. We will be fixing those, so it looks a little better. Now it's really just searching for peers, and it's basically going to start syncing up pretty soon. So just ignore for now all of the finality header errors, because it's not synced up yet. That's why it's showing. Okay, looks like we got 6 peers. Still searching. Because of the weak subjectivity quick sync that we did, it should not be that much longer before it actually syncs up. But everything is actually working properly, even though we are getting some errors from the finality header. This will show up if you are doing the weak subjectivity sync, because we don't have the previous blocks for the finality header. Oh yes, the other thing to sort of check was making sure that the arguments that we added were actually added. So right now we're great. Yeah, looks like it's on port 9001, which is great. The REST server API is good. If you are having any issues with your geth docker, you will get errors in regards to not chain but eth1. So we're not getting those, which is actually good. So it is able to talk to the geth docker though. Okay, so it looks like we have synced up. You can see we are on the current slot head, and we got the finalized state. Perfect. Okay. Oh yes, so it's also disclaimed in here as well. So when your beacon node is fully synced, you will see what we just saw. And then we can remove the quick sync CLI flags going forward as backfill sync starts to fill back the rest of the chain. Okay, next we will actually, you can remove the weak subjectivity CLI commands afterwards if you wish. We will skip that part for now. And we'll go right into getting the metrics actually set up here. So now we will actually start the local metrics Docker container, and that is this command here. So let's stop outputting here by using Control-C, and then we will clear that. Okay, so now we will start up Prometheus and Grafana services. So now it's actually pulling the images, and we'll run the server once it's done. Okay, it's good. You can also see the password for the Grafana login is actually admin, and if you had set the admin password from the environment.env file, then it would have associated that, but the default is admin, and then default password is admin, and I'll go in there and show you how to change it. Okay, so now when it says creating Lodestar, Prometheus, and Grafana done, you can double check that it is up by utilizing sudo docker ps. Great. Looks like those are good. They're running. It's been up for 41 seconds. Great. Okay, so that's all in here. Now hostname. Okay, so in order to check the metrics, you actually can use your web browser. So if you're unsure about the host IP, you can use hostname --, capital I, and it'll output your host IPs. So this has 2 network adapters on it, so that's why it has 2 IP addresses, but we'll utilize the first one there. So my metrics link is that, and then ensure to append the :3000 because that's the port Grafana's on. So if everything works well, you should get a Grafana page like so. Admin, and password default is admin, and now I'll ask you for a new password. Passwords must match. Okay. There we go, user password changed. Okay. So if you go into the side here, there's dashboards, and then there's browse. So we can utilize the Lodestar setup here. And then under here where it says Contabo 1, we just switch it to Lodestar, so it pulls from our local node here. Okay, so all of the instructions are actually in here. Everything that I described. Let's try this again. Of course, when it comes to demoing stuff, things don't always like to work the way it should. Let's see if I can fix this. I will pause the video for now. Okay, we're back. Just a little hiccup there, but if anything happens, just try to refresh your page, relog in, should reconnect to your metrics there. Okay, so this is basically your Lodestar Grafana metrics here. So we have a bunch of stuff that we do collect here in regards to your node. So it started off as synced, of course, because we did the quick sync. And then a bunch of other metrics that we use to help debug and to analyze a bunch of things related to Lodestar. So this is how you access it. So that's it for metrics. Next, we'll actually set up some validators for Lodestar. So this will involve going back to when we had part one, where we generated the keys on well, in this case, the Mac. So over here, wherever you actually did the key generation, you will likely have a validator keys file inside of the staking deposit CLI with the deposit script there, the executable. Inside you'll have the deposit data and the key store, so we will need to get these files onto your staking server. So copy them onto your USB drive, and for example here, where we had transferred the private key previously, I will actually copy this into the USB, and then I'll show you how to import it into your Ubuntu server. Okay, so I basically stuck the USB with these folders, or sorry, the validator key folder here, into the server. So now we have access to these files, which we will need for setting up the validators to stake. Okay, so now we will actually create a key stores folder in our Lodestar directory, in which we will be putting those key store files. So we'll copy that command there. Go back to our server, we'll make dir, which basically made a key store file inside of the Lodestar directory. So we will go into Lodestar using change directory Lodestar. Now that we're in there, we can use ls. You can see that now there is a key store file right over here, right there. All right. So now that that's set up, we will copy the validator keys from the USB stick to the Lodestar key stores directory right here. So how do we do that? Okay, well, we need to mount the USB stick into a folder so that we can access it. So with Ubuntu, basically what we need to do is figure out where that USB stick is. So we will utilize a command called sudo fdisk and then -L, and that will show us all of the sort of disk drives that are connected to the server. So here is my USB stick. It's my SanDisk, like 232 gigs, and this is the volume we need to mount where the file is stored. So just remember /dev/sda2. It might be different if on your specific setup, so just ensure that you get the right one. It may not necessarily be SDA2 for you. Okay, so now to actually mount this thing, we would need to make a folder of some sort to mount it on. So what I usually do is I usually create a folder in the media directory, which will create a folder just very easily accessible. So I will utilize the sudo command and then /media, and then I'll make a new folder called USB-stick. Oops. Sorry, that's sudo make dir, that's make directory, mkdir, Now there should be a folder there. So you can check by using the change directory command, cd, and then going to media / or just go to media, and then we can use ls to see if there's a folder there called USB stick, and there is. Okay. So now to actually mount it, we will need to utilize a command called sudo mount. Sudo mount will take an argument, which is the volume that we looked at earlier. So we were looking at /dev/sda2, and we want to mount that to the USB stick folder, which is /media/USB stick. Okay. So now that that's mounted, we can actually check to see if the file is in there. So we are in the media folder right now. We can do cd USB stick, and now use the ls command, and look at that. The validator keys folder is in there. Okay, so now we have to copy some files. So we'll go into the validator keys folder by utilizing cd, change directory, and then we'll go into the validator keys folder. Now if you do ls, you can see, okay, we have our deposit data file and the key store file, which is an exact replication of what we have here. Perfect. So now what we need is this actual key store file is what we need inside Lodestar for it to start staking, that to be able to sign messages for that validator. So we'll utilize the copy command from Linux, and that is sudo cp, okay? And then we will select key store. So you just need to type, like, the first few letters, and then use the tab key, and it'll fill everything up for you because it knows exactly which file you're talking about. So we're going to copy the key store folder into our Lodestar folder. So remember that squiggly sign, /, that basically brings us to our user directory. And then we will select the Lodestar folder inside of it, and then the key store folder. And by utilizing this, we will now copy the key store from the USB stick into our key stores directory. Okay. And now we can double check that, of course, by changing the directory. We'll go into our Lodestar folder /key stores. And now we can list what's in there. Perfect. There's the key store file. Okay. There was a bug in Lodestar where if there were anything other than key store files in the folder, it would generate errors. That should be fixed now, or at least in the next version. But we still, don't recommend you putting anything else inside of that folder. Just the key store file is all that you really need. Okay. So now we can actually unmount the USB drive because we don't really need it anymore. So to do that, you use the sudo umount command, and then we'll just put in the volume of the drive, which is /dev/sda2, and now you can remove your USB stick. Okay. So that basically is what's explained here. Basically everything that I demoed up to this point here. Unmount your USB stick. Now you can continue to the next step, which is to configure the Lodestar validator client. This section here of the setup guide basically just teaches you how to do it if you had generated those 24 words on the same local machine as your Lodestar server. Okay, now we'll configure the Lodestar validator client. So now we actually need to import the key store password. So remember the password in part 1 where it asks you for a password or passphrase that you use to encrypt the keys with. Well, now we need it. So now we're going to create a text file using nano, and it's going to put it into the key stores folder of our Lodestar directory. So we'll go back here. You can just paste the command and type in the password. So the password I use is blockchain123 exclamation mark. We will exit by using Control X, yes to save, and then enter. Now if you do ls, you will also see that there is a password.txt file which will allow Lodestar to basically know what the password is to decrypt this key store so that we can start staking. Okay, now we're actually going to create the Docker Compose file for the validator so that we can get that up and running now. Okay, so there already is one in the Lodestar directory, but we will actually recreate it. So let's follow the guide command. So let's clear this first. This will bring us back to the main Lodestar directory. And now we will open up the text editor nano. Which will open up the YAML file which already exists. You could actually just erase all of this erase all of this and replace it with this. The easiest way to actually do that would be, let's exit out of this using Control X. We won't save anything. Let's just do nano. So nano will get us into the right place. We'll likely change that that step there. So now we will actually copy and paste because it's probably easier to do this way. Okay, so we'll copy and paste what we have on the setup guide. And if you are a testnet user, you can go from our stable images to our unstable ones if you'd like to try that for the testnet people. If not, then you can pretty much just take this. Right now we are taking the stable tag for the validator client. We can add any other sort of additional commands you would like here. These are the default ones that we have. And that's it. So we will use Control X to exit. We will save yes. And then the file name that we want to overwrite is docker-compose.validator.yml, which is also stated over here in this step. It'll say, do you want to overwrite it? Yes. Okay, so now it's overwritten. Now we will actually start it. So we'll copy this. Make sure we're in the right directory. We are. Okay. Now, let's light it up using this command. Okay, created Lodestar validator container. So now to double check, we'll use sudo docker ps. Okay. There we go. Actually, it looks like there might be an issue, so we can actually debug this live and see what's going on. Okay, so to see what's going on with the container, we will do sudo docker, logs. We don't have to do the follow, we just need to see Lodestar validator. What's going on? Invalid password. Look at that. That was my mess up. So now you know how to actually figure out what's going on. Let me see if I remember what this password is and get back to you. Okay, think I may have fixed the password issue, so let's give this a try again. Okay, so, oops. Okay, so if you're getting this, it means you're in the wrong directory. So we'll go back to our directory. You need to be in the Lodestar main directory to run this, or else it's going to say file not found. Okay, now let's try it again. Okay, created Lodestar validator, so let's give it a check. So docker ps. Okay, good. It's not consistently restarting anymore, which is a good sign. So now let's take a look at the logs and see what's going on. Sudo docker logs and then follow. And Lodestar validator _1. Okay, perfect. So I was able to decrypt the one validator key store now. Genesis available. Perfect. So everything looks good. And it is ready to actually do work, which is great. If it's not printing anything else, it's because it's not getting any duties. And that's because we haven't actually deposited the 32 ETH yet, which we will now do as part of the next step of this demo. So we basically completed everything here. Great. And you'll notice that if we do sudo docker ps, you have these 5 running containers now. What I usually suggest people do is actually just reboot the computer and make sure all of these containers start up again as well. So we could do that. You can utilize the sudo reboot command and then just make sure everything starts up. So let's just restart this quickly and make sure it works. Be right back when the server's back. Okay, that should be enough time. So let's log back into the server here. Good, we'll zoom in. Okay, it's a good sign. We actually see the system load, so we just go sudo docker ps and just make sure everything is running. Yep, it's good. If you want to check, you can always do sudo docker logs. You can just look at Lodestar beacon node 1. Okay, everything started. Searching for peers. Perfect. Then we can check the Lodestar validator 1. Okay. Node is still syncing, so that makes sense. Okay. We'll go back to that shortly. For now, let's move on to part 4, which is actually funding the keys. Okay. So for the Prater testnet users, we will use the Prater side of the Ethereum Launchpad to upload the deposit data and our 32 ETH. So it's very much similar to doing it on mainnet. It's just this is specifically for the testnets. So we'll just click on that, proof of stake, great. These are all the disclaimers that you should read through. Okay, so I'm technically capable. This is exactly what this tutorial is for. Okay, key management, long-term commitment, early adoption risk, checklists, great, confirmation, great. As soon as more Lodestar users, people, start using it, we will show up here as well. Or sorry, not the execution client, but on the consensus client side. So help us get there. All right, become validator, great. we are going to create one validator, and we are using Linux. Oh, this is just an explanation about generating the key pairs, which we've already done, so it doesn't really matter too much. Keeping my keys safe, great, continue. Now, remember the file that we had generated, let's see, here we go. It came with a deposit data file, right? So this is what the staking launchpad needs. So it knows how to link your validator on the beacon chain there. So now we will connect a wallet. We'll use Metamask. So I have Goerli ETH here on the Goerli test network. So let's use Metamask, connect with that, and we will deposit 32 Goerli ETH. Make sure you understand all the risks. Check the deposit contract address, which is very important. Making sure that you're on the right launchpad site, so you're not sending it to the wrong place. Okay, I know that I'm sending it to the correct deposit contract. Maybe we can be prudent and actually do it. Protect yourself against double deposits. Okay, so that's our validator public key. We're going to confirm our deposit. Okay, let's reveal the address. I believe this one is actually the mainnet one. Yeah, this is the mainnet contract. For the testnet, is not as important, I guess. But for mainnet, it is. So if we were doing it on mainnet, we would want to make sure that the address matches this, where we're sending it to. So we'll confirm deposit. Here we go, data, details. So you'll see here, this is the contract address you're sending it to. If we were using it on mainnet, you would just compare that it's actually sending it to this address here. But since we are not, for demonstration purposes, I will just confirm this transaction. Get it sent off. Okay, transaction is started. Okay, once it's successful, you can check on Beaconsha. It's probably not found yet because we literally just deposited it, but utilizing this validator public key, you will be able to see it show up. It'll take a period of time before it actually gets enabled, and the deposit contract picks up your deposit. So besides that, everything else, it's just waiting now, but everything that you've done thus far has basically set you up for success. So eventually you will see the status of your deposit on Beaconsha, which will look something like this. And that's pretty much it. And then just, of course, make sure on your server that your node is actually syncing up properly. So we'll do sudo docker ds. Let's just check on the logs here. Sudo docker logs lodestar beacon node 1. Great, it's all synced up here. And then we'll do the same for, let's do geth docker. Make sure that it's importing. Yep. probably looking for a bunch of peers right now. That's fine. The beacon node is not giving us any ETH1 issues, so it should be fine. And then you can just check your metrics and make sure that they're still actually working. So you can see that we've actually process restarted here for a little bit, but now we're synced up again. Got some peers, and then you're able to just basically keep an eye on everything here. And that's it. If you have any questions, please feel free to join our ChainSafe Discord. You can reach us inside of the Lodestar general chat. And thanks for watching. We will catch you on the other side, and thank you for running Lodestar. We really appreciate it.